Are you feeling like you've lost your voice? Like you don't really know who you are? You don't know how to say no and when to say yes? Well, you could be having a problem with boundaries. Now, boundaries serve a very, very important purpose in our lives. And if I may use an analogy of boundaries, it's like an invisible fence. If you look at yourself and a neighbor, it's what separates you from your neighbor. In a similar way, all of them have a protective mechanism. In the same way, boundaries has a protective mechanism. Boundaries protect you physically, emotionally, and mentally. You should be able to say no without feeling any guilt. This is important for you to be able to have a sense of well-being in any sort of relationship that you're in. Where sometimes you land up feeling as though everybody else's needs is more important than you. You have this almost internal dilemma that starts happening and you start feeling guilty. What if they don't see me as a person I am? You land up trying to people please and lose your own sense of identity. That's even if you know who you are. Because people usually who have boundary problems don't even know who they are. And that's one of the fundamental causes of it. If you're sitting there saying, who am I? What I stand for? Then it doesn't really matter which way you go. You can land up pleasing this one, doing whatever anybody else wants. And you don't have your own anchor, your own sense of what is yes and what is no. We often end up feeling responsible for somebody else's happiness and we neglect our own. And it becomes a problem that our identity almost becomes enmeshed with somebody else's. And you kind of go with the flow, and before long you realize you're starting to feel a great sense of resentment. You're starting to have these emotions that are built up within you, and you feel as though all your needs are neglected. You feel as though you're taken for granted. If you know what I'm talking about, you could have a problem with boundaries. And it's important for you to identify what boundaries are, for you to know how to go about setting those boundaries and becoming an individual that's well balanced, that knows exactly what is right for you and when to say yes and how to say no appropriately. So boundaries come in different relationships, whether it be a working relationship, whether it be with a friendship or in a romantic relationship, whatever it may be. We all need to set boundaries. But sometimes people just don't know how to appropriately set boundaries. Now, I've been in situations at work when someone just doesn't like something and they just say, no, I'm not prepared to do it. And if you're in a managerial role or in a leadership role, sometimes doing something unpopular is needed. You have to make those unpopular decisions. And if you don't, it's a massive dereliction of duty. In the same way, if you're in a personal relationship and you don't want to do something that may seem to be unpopular or cause a negative impact on the way people perceive you, we'll end up being fearful and we're scared to take the decisions and we're scared to act upon it and speak what we really feel. In the workplace, the opposite could happen is that you just keep on saying yes, 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 and you'll end up being thrown more and more work. You know those kinds of people that because you're always there, you're always willing to help, you're always willing to go the extra mile. Everybody knows it's in a safe pair of hands. If you give it to you, they know it's just going to get done. So what happens if you don't set boundaries and you don't act within what is really your job? It can result in you experiencing burnout because you take on more than you should and you'll end up being overwhelmed and exhausted all the time. If you're in a personal relationship, for example, friends, they take advantage of your good heart. You know those friends that always want to dump their kids off and make sure you look after them and say, we're only going to go out for a few minutes. Just keep on loading extra responsibility on you. They have some event and it's easy to ask you to jump in and help because they know that you're good at setting tables and arranging events and coordinating events. And what do? You just keep on saying, yes, sure. You're somebody who's going to please everybody to your own detriment. And what happens is you start building this massive resentment. And ultimately, that relationship starts fizzling out and you start withdrawing because you're incapable of saying no. When it comes to romantic relationships, what starts happening is you start developing a codependency where your needs no longer matter, where you start only existing to please the other person and to meet their needs. And you start filling in, you start having this massive resentment. What is important to you is by the by, and you kind of suppress all your own needs and you just start pleasing your partner. Whatever they want to do, wherever they want to go, you just start fitting in with their plans and start ignoring who you are, what your needs are, even though it starts harming you. But on the flip side, I've also seen individuals who overdo it. You know, those kind of individuals who say, I'm now going to come in and set boundaries. And they start setting boundaries as a form of manipulation. So I want to just differentiate individuals who use it to manipulate to get their own way versus the true purpose and the intention of a boundary. A boundary is there to protect yourself. It's not there to actually start manipulating somebody else. If you're going to go in and set boundaries with the wrong intention, it's going to fail. It's going to have negative consequences that you aren't looking for. So you must go in with pure intentions, being intact with your personal needs and understanding what they are and being able to address it. So what are the consequences of boundaries being violated? It starts building stress and strain on a relationship. The natural law of consequences are going to take its toll. Eventually, when you're going to feel so uncomfortable and so upset, you may either explode one day or you'll end up having negative consequences by having that backlash, and it's going to result in something negative. My advice to you is to nip it in the bud. As soon as you start feeling those emotions and that strain starting to build up, learn to be true to yourself and learn to communicate how you are feeling in a very skillful way. An important part of this communication is to address something in a timely manner. If you see something that's upsetting you, something that's starting to cause this resentment building up within you and that strain starting to happen, you need to be very clear about the issue at hand and start addressing it in a very direct way, saying this is how I feel, the impact it's having on me. And communication is absolutely key. It's almost like a storm. If you have a look at a storm that starts brewing, just prior to the storm, you see it's almost electrical. Well, for those of you in South Africa, we have absolutely electric storms. You get thunder, you get lightning, the wind starts blowing you get the dust, and the leaves are pulled up in the air in different directions. Now, in the same way in a relationship, you start feeling this emotional turmoil that starts building up inside you, and your emotions start running wild. But the minute the rain starts, initially it starts hard pour, and the minute it starts getting that soft rain, you start seeing the calm, and everything starts, especially after a storm. You can feel the freshness in the air. It's absolutely beautiful to walk around in the Highveld here in South Africa after a storm, to see the absolute clear blue skies. And it's almost as though everything is crisp. The air is wonderful. So what I want to differentiate is when that rain comes down, either it can be a hard belting rain, and it could also contain hail. In hail in South Africa, we sometimes have hail the size of golf balls, and it causes massive damage. And every single year for 3 consecutive years, I got stuck in a hailstorm and my car was completely ruined and completely damaged. The insurance company must have started questioning me and doubting if it was really legitimate that I got caught in another hailstorm. But I'd just like to use the analogy of hail causes damage. In the same way, if you're going to go in like a bull in a china shop and you're just going to spit out and be vindictive and nasty and upset because somebody's violated your boundaries, you're just going to cause massive, massive damage. And the question is, after how many times can somebody sustain it? Are they going to start really believing you? After 3 times, my car having gone into the panel beaters, they started doubting how reliable I am and how reliable my story actually was. Similarly, in your life, if you're going to go in and you're going to be absolutely hard and damaging in your relationships, people are going to lose respect for you and you're going to lose credibility. It is actually a fine balance between asserting what you feel and what you need and not being destructive in the relationship. Sometimes people are quite receptive, but usually it requires you to have the greatest amount of empathy and the greatest amount of strength to articulate what it is that you need and how it impacts you without pointing fingers, without being judgmental, without criticizing. And you usually command a lot more respect. So that's that fine drizzle that starts happening. That's when you communicate in an authentic way that actually expresses the damage that it causes to the relationship when somebody violates your boundaries. And that's when you start building those relationships. Because post you having vented and having expressed how you feel, you'll feel a great sense of relief. Great sense of calm. You have a personal responsibility to set boundaries. This means knowing what is within your control and what's not within your control. You have control of the way you feel, the way you react. That's within your control. You have no control over somebody else's feelings, their emotions, and their behavior. Take control of what you have the ability to control. So what are the benefits of you expressing yourself and setting boundaries? First of all, you're starting to grow. You're starting to know who you are, and you're starting to shape that true identity, where you know what your true north is, who you are, what you actually stand for. The next benefit is you're going to start feeling more self-fulfilled. In any relationship, you're going to find that there's a good balance of give and take. Individuals start respecting you because you are respecting yourself by expressing what your needs are and what your boundaries are. You're protecting your inner well-being, your physical well-being, as well as your emotional well-being. This is the most important part of self-care, is to set those boundaries and do so with the greatest amount of skill possible. And the outcome for you will be the most fulfilling relationships where you're going to be your true self and you're really just going to flourish. Boundaries are essentially about empowering yourself, making healthier choices, and building better, more meaningful relationships based on strong values and mutual respect. Thanks so much for watching till this point. If you have any comments, I'd like to hear from you. If you don't want to miss out on my next video, make sure to hit the subscribe button. I hope to see you in the next video.